welcome to all of you who have come first time for a Smoothie with Sharan session. Smoothie with Sharan is a talk show where we basically speak to people who do things differently. And this is for health, for compassion, and for environment, because this is what Sharan is working for and working towards. And Sharan is an acronym. It stands for Sanctuary for Health and Reconnection to Animals and Nature. And the reason we are having any kind of health issue, any kind of energy, mental health and the environment is a lot to do because we're disconnected. And we're going to be meeting two very special women today who have actually reconnected to animals, reconnected to nature. And once you reconnect to either one, all three kind of just fall into place. That's how the system works. So Dr. Nandita started Sharan in 2005, and she's helped thousands of people reverse and prevent diseases just by going on a whole food plant-based diet. And Smoothie is one of her magic, which we all have, whoever are following, and we've seen loads and loads of amazing benefits. So let's start today's very, very interesting session. I'm very excited because we are going across the borders and we're going to be having, let's invite our first guest, Ailya. She's from Pakistan. And hi, Ailya. And Ailya was an architect. And once she made a connection, her life changed. It's so true. Once you make the connection, life just changes. And now she's totally into animal rights activism. And she became a vegetarian in 2016 and is a vegan since the past 2 years. And it's very interesting to understand living in a country where meat is primary, the kind of diet that you take. How does one actually take that stance and then decide to live in a place where you decide to become a vegetarian and then eventually a vegan? So welcome, Ailya. Very nice to have you here. Could you tell us a bit about what are you doing currently now?
Thank you so much, Reina. Thank you for having me on this platform. It's so great to be amongst all of you. So currently what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to start a vegan dialogue, and vegan dialogue, especially in Pakistan, which is a predominantly, as you all know, Muslim country and a very largely meat-eating country all of a sudden. It wasn't like this before, but it has become over time when we see how capitalism is working right now. And what I'm trying to do
earlier, it wasn't a meat-eating country, you're saying?
No, it wasn't, because if we look at a few years back, 15 years back, there were certain days of the week where you could not get meat in Pakistan. It was balanced diet was something that was more common. There were no 20 years back, we didn't have KFCs and all these fast food chains.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden we see this influx coming in. And what I'm trying to do is, in whatever my capacity is, to educate people on animal rights, and I'm trying to tell them how to reconnect with our local foods, our indigenous food palettes, how you don't need to add meat to everything. So I'm trying to do whatever I can to bring people back to that connection which we've lost in the past 20 years.
Right. So lovely. You're really going against the tide. So how has the journey been?
The journey has been pretty tough. If I have to divide this into two parts for me personally, and then in terms of the work as well, because I had to unlearn so much and relearn so much. Coming from a Pathan family, which was, if anyone here knows about Pathans, they eat meat a lot. It's very an important part of their lifestyle. And breaking all of those learnings from childhood, and then trying to relearn my relation with food, and then trying to teach and help people discover that. So during that journey, what I've constantly encountered are some roadblocks. Like I faced a lot of backlash from friends, some from family members. I think we all have some sort of experience with that. And And then, of course, there are certain dialogues that need to be had. But one of the major ones is people's inability to accept that all animals are sentient. And
Right.
trying to just build that communication is a bit tough. And I'm learning to do that with time now.
I can understand. I can understand. So, how did you make the connection?
It was a very interesting thing that happened. So around in 2016, one of my friends took me to a talk by there was this Dr. Ghazala who came to talk about animal rights in Islam. Back
Mm-hmm.
then, I had no idea about veganism, the word speciesism, any of these things. I was just rescuing animals and trying to do my best, but I wasn't vegan or in any case. So he thought I might be interested in animal rights, so I should go and attend this talk. And there, um, Dr. Ghazala talked about how if you eat and consume depression, you will become depression. And I was going through depression in those days.
Uh-huh.
And that
Okay.
thing stuck to me. Um, I started processing that. I started realizing that no, chicken's not good, and meat's not good, and this is not good. And I started to separate myself from all of these meat palettes and
Mm-hmm.
started incorporating more fruits and vegetables into my diet. And I saw a great transformation. I've shared some pictures with you, Rena, in private. So
I
I
know.
saw a great transformation in terms of my health, my body,
Right. And your
uh,
depression.
and my depression, So
Wow. Wow. All right. That's amazing. And it's so true what she said, because if you eat, you are what you eat. And if you eat depression, you're going to be depressed, right? And obviously, I mean, as you rightly said, animals are sentient, they understand what's happening and they know that they're going to be dying. So that fear, that, can, is part of it comes to us when we are having them. Right. So I'm so glad you made the connection and that you're working, and that once you make the connection, you just cannot help but, be a part of this movement. And I can totally relate and understand how that is. So, Ailya, let's invite Rubaiya from Bangladesh now. So we're going to another part, another beautiful neighbor of ours, Rubaiya, who was, I should say, not is, was an IT consultant, and was in US doing very well and well settled everything. But it's been 7 years now. She's in Bangladesh, and I mean, maybe more, but 7 years vegan, and doing a lot again in a place where we are assuming that meat is a staple diet, and you're again walking against the tide. So, Rubaiya, tell us, how did your journey begin?
My journey as a vegan advocate, and first of all, thank you for having me. You know how much
We
I
have to do our
admire.
cheers.
Oh, yes,
Our
cheers.
smoothie. Yes. Thank
Yes.
you. Oh, I love the glass, Rubaiya. What are you having today in your smoothie?
I'm having some banana, some vegan yogurt, and basil.
Mm,
It's an interesting but very nice combination.
yeah. Tell us, Rubaiya, how did you make the connection?
I actually had my work in animal welfare primarily started with dogs. And
Mhm,
I really didn't look into any other areas for the longest time, primarily because it was so overwhelming, um, working in dog welfare, you know, dog population management in Bangladesh. And then
mhm,
I was invited to do a TED talk. There was a TED Dhaka, and I was
mhm,
invited to do a TED talk on the organization that I had set up to stop dog culling in Bangladesh. And the
mhm.
whole talk was focused on dogs,
Okay.
dogs and animal welfare synonymously. And I remember there were a whole bunch of comments on that talk, people asking if I only consider dogs to be animal, and if why my work in animal welfare only includes dogs, and if I
Mm,
was vegan, if I was a vegetarian. I was a
mm,
vegetarian at the time, but I wasn't vegan. So that really dawned on me. And then, I started thinking about it. And of course, I've been working with dogs for so long, and then goats started to look like dogs. And then with that came cows. And, once you fall in love with one animal, you fall in love with all the animals.
Right.
And then one fateful day, I watched the movie Earthling. And, there was no going back from there. I was a
Yeah.
vegetarian already, but until then, I really didn't consider becoming vegan
Right.
because I didn't know enough why it was important. To me, only killing animals was bad. So the horror of dairy and egg industry was completely unknown to me. So
Okay.
that was a big turning point.
Right. Okay. So I remember, Rubaiya, you mentioning that you actually used to stay away from animals and you wouldn't even kind of that was an initial part where you were kind of scared of them. And how did
Yes,
that how did dog welfare begin?
well, dog welfare began with a cat. um,
Oh,
I never had animals around me when I was growing up, and I remember being quite scared of dogs when I was a kid. I dabbled with kittens here and there, but I was never genuinely interested in them, let alone worry about their welfare. But then in 2002, I remember I was working in the US at the time, and my colleague really begged me to take in a kitten as a foster because she was moving and there was a kitten that needed a home for 2 weeks. And I just downright rejected the request. I said that there's no way I'm bringing in a kitten home. I never want to have anything to do with animals. But she begged and begged. So finally, I brought the kitten home, and it was a 1-month-old kitten. And that tiny thing sort of took over my life. And as they say, the rest is history. I never gave the kitten back, and he died at the age of 19 last year.
okay. All right. Okay. So you got him to Bangladesh.
No, I actually found him a home, but I kept in touch with the
Gotcha.
family.
Okay.
And from that kitten, I started volunteering for the local TNR organization, the local zoo.
Right.
I started fostering animals, so it sort of took on uh, its own life from there. And then when I moved back to Bangladesh, naturally I wanted to continue my work as an animal welfare advocate. But to my surprise, I saw that there was nothing. There was no infrastructure. There was no animal welfare organization.
Right.
So I set up one in
Yeah.
2009.
I think it was the first one in Bangladesh, isn't it?
Yes, yes,
The first animal welfare. Yeah. So
yes.
it's amazing how one incident or one comment or one thing from a talk can actually change the direction of your life.
Absolutely.
If you both were doing well in your careers and you changed yourself and you changed your purpose of existence, right? So I'm sure you both must have received so much to be able to want to give so much and take care of these animals who cannot speak. Like what Ailya, what have you received after going plant-based?
I think just generally the love that I get from animals, like I feel that keeps me going. I have 5 cats right now. There were more, some went out for adoption. And so the love that I get from my animals, and even the animals that are not mine, but I just feel that they're looking at me constantly and they're like, you know what, do something for us.
Yeah,
And I think that keeps me going. I don't know what it is. It's a self-found purpose, I guess, but that
right,
keeps me
right.
going every day.
What about you, Rubaiya?
When I talk about veganism, I always mention how I became vegan for animals. And then I used to suffer from terrible asthma, and I used to be hospitalized every year with terrible bronchial asthma. Even when I was a vegetarian, same thing. It's, the year I became vegan was the first year I wasn't not only hospitalized, I didn't have any asthma attack. And that
Wonderful.
was such a shock to me that, here I was feeling um, rather, noble for giving up animal products. But it's actually, that was an understanding that I had at that moment, that it's all connected. We're not really doing anyone any favor. We're part of the ecosystem. We're all equals. So when we hurt others, we're in turn hurting ourselves as
So
well,
true. So
and
true.
vice versa. So I really think of animals as my equal, and the benefits that I received were basically all the damages that I caused to my health reversed. So it
Wonderful.
wasn't any added benefit. I felt like my equilibrium was restored, or
Right.
I never experienced good health in that sense. So for the
How
first time to receive that and to make the connection that it's just because we're all connected and we're all part of the same
right.
ecosystem.
Right. And so grateful that we made the connection. I always am so grateful because there are so many who are not yet able to do it, and I guess that's
It's
where we
it's a
come.
blessing. I
Yeah.
feel it's a
Yeah.
blessing, Rena. And I really love this quotation by Maya Angelou. She said that uh, do your best until you know better, and
Yeah.
when you know better, do better.
Better.
So
Correct.
when we advocate for veganism, we are not asking people to do anything. We're basically just sharing information and hoping that one information, one anecdote, one person could probably flick that switch, which my kitten flicked for me. Because
Absolutely
it's such a blessing, and you want to have everybody in your life to receive that blessing.
true. And it's
So
important because we are all connected, as you said.
yes,
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
and the energy that these beings are giving, all of us are giving, is affecting the energy of the planet.
Yes,
And
yes,
like you spoke, Ailya, about depression. I mean, it's become so common. If you start
very
thinking
common.
about it, we have all the possible comforts from the time from our earlier generations. Like look at us. We are talking. I mean, you're in Pakistan and Bangladesh, and I'm right now in Dubai, but from India. So how we are all connected so beautifully, everything is so beautifully, but such a high level of depression, and even in youngsters nowadays. So
Yes,
yeah, we never connect that food also could be a part, and because we are all,
food is the biggest part. I would say it's
yeah,
really the biggest part.
yeah,
Your gut health regulates everything. It regulates
absolutely,
your physiological health, your emotional health, your spiritual health, and you can't have one without the other. So it
absolutely,
all starts with food.
food,
There are
absolutely.
other components, mental health, it's become such a complex issue that I don't want to oversimplify it by saying that, okay, if you just become vegan, it'll take care of everything. But you
Right.
can't have sound physical or mental health without being vegan.
I totally agree because I've seen personally also so much change just by, and your spiritual clarity also becomes very. I think you kind of, it's something to be experienced. I don't think it can be even
Yes,
described in
yes,
words. So,
yes.
Ailya, tell me, how is the scene in Pakistan? Like, how many vegans would we have? And it's so great to hear that there is a number. I mean, it is slowly and steadily. How is the situation?
Okay, so when we think about vegans in Pakistan, there are very few. I think I made this approximation around 250, maybe 300 purely vegans all and spread across. But
Mhm.
there, I find a bit of hope whenever I speak to younger people who are university going or somewhat climate conscious. I feel
Right.
that they have this understanding, they're open to listening somewhat. And
Right.
I'm starting to see very few, 3 to 4 grassroots vegans who are
Mhm.
trying to now do things a bit differently than the other people who are working for rescues or welfare or wildlife. So
Right.
I do have that hope, but I wish that somehow I could catalyze this whole process and make it faster so that we increase in number
Of course.
as
Of
soon
course,
as
but at
possible.
least there is a beginning. I mean, the beginning has happened, right? What about in Bangladesh, Rubaiya? How is the situation there? Do we have a lot of people who are conscious who've made this connection?
Bangladesh is the lowest meat eating country in the world. And this
Uh-huh.
is something I also didn't know. I found out about this statistics very recently. And that's not because we are conscious, it's because we just don't have the infrastructure to produce meat.
Neat.
Uh,
Okay.
but we were primarily a fish eating country because we're,
Close
surrounded
to,
by rivers.
yeah.
And when I was doing my research, I found out that 80% of the country's meat is consumed by 5% of the population, and that's
Okay.
in the capital. And
Okay.
40% of the beef is consumed in Dhaka alone. So
Okay.
you're really looking at the rich who are consuming the most amount of meat. Because
Neat.
if you come
Okay.
to Dhaka, the number of steakhouses and burger joints and fried chicken eateries that you will see, it's really, it's shocking how many of them mushroomed just in the last few years.
Mhm.
So we set up our first vegan food service in Dhaka. This was the first vegan food service in Bangladesh.
Mhm.
And we focused
It's
on
called,
that.
I love the name. I love the name, Bangu Vegan.
Bangu vegan, Bangu.
I love
And
it.
the
Yes.
word Bangu is almost a slang. It's used as a derogatory term for Bengali or Bengali. But I
Uh-huh.
took that and I gave it a positive spin because, uh, I consider myself a Bangu.
Bangu.
So that's where the name came from. So
Okay.
our food is very much focused and targeted to that clientele, the ones who are going and spending a fortune on the steaks and the
On,
burgers.
right.
So it has a very hip feel to it. The menu, the location is very swanky. So it's a very boutique kind of a vegan place,
Vegan. Okay.
and
Wonderful.
we are also bringing back all the food that we Bangladeshis ate anyway, like panta
Mm.
bhat. Panta bhat is the fermented rice which is consumed in the villages, and
Mm.
that was something that would only be served during the New Year's. So we
Mm.
brought it back. We serve it throughout the year. We have so many expats ordering panta bhat, and then the rich get interested. So, and food is aspirational. I really
Abs.
believe the food, fashion, if the well-to-do, whatever the well-to-do eat, the middle class would want to emulate,
Follow.
and so on and so
Right.
forth.
Right.
So that's it. It was a very strategic decision to give it that kind of a branding, that
Right.
it's an
And it made
upscale.
sense because they are our
Yes,
target as far as,
yes,
so it's
yes,
definitely heartening to know that Bangladesh is the lowest meat eating country. It really
yes,
feels good to know that. And
yes.
I mean, thank God there's no infrastructure and saved from
There,
so
the
much.
government is hell bent on developing the infrastructure, but I can tell you the Bangu Vegan, since it started, it really took me by surprise. The popularity that it has gained in such a short time. We
How one,
catered to weddings last year for the first time. Couple of weddings. We get invited to corporate events. To it's Dhaka, it's Bangladesh. So I still pinch myself sometimes. The popularity.
yeah, right, right. Okay, yeah, thanks to Rubaiya, there is a Bangu vegan in Bangladesh or Dhaka. But what about where you live? How do you manage being? I mean, are there any vegan restaurants in Pakistan?
So there aren't any completely vegan restaurants. I know of one or two that started off as home-based chefs, and there's one restaurant in Lahore that mixes a non-vegan food and vegan food, but they do have a small vegan menu. But it caters to the elite. It's not for the masses. But what I did to bring about a small change in this whole process is that I did like two things. So first, I started this get together thing on Sundays, which I
Mhm.
try to do most Sundays. I try to invite as whoever my friends and friends of friends, and I cook vegan food and I invite them to taste it. And they usually give me really interesting remarks, like Rubaiya just said, the biryani without the meat. And
Yeah.
they are like, wow, this is good. And if
Wow.
I make burger patties without the meat, and that I get that kind of a feedback. So I'm trying to do that on a grassroots level,
How
where I
wonderful.
try.
Like an open house for anybody to come and try. Yeah.
Exactly. And if they want to bring in something vegan. So that gives them an experience of
Right.
going and buying something vegan and finding those roadblocks, where there is no
Right. We're
vegan
starting to
alternative.
think about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Because a lot
So
of our food, I mean, Indian, Pakistani food is kind of similar, the vegetarian part as well. Like you have your aloo gobi or your dals and
yeah.
your vegetables. So many people think, oh my God, vegan. But once you actually sit to think about it, there's a lot of vegan,
Yes.
already vegan food that we are consuming. Right. And what's the second thing that you do?
And the second thing is, this was a small initiative. I haven't registered it yet. It's called
Mhm.
Ghaspoos.
Okay.
That means leaves and twigs. So Ghaspoos was it started off as a pop-up at Sunday at a market, at a food
Uh-huh.
market, and where I introduced these different foods which were vegan and calling it Ghaspoos and taking a very fun side to veganism.
Okay.
It's been on pause since 2 months, but I'm going to start it again hopefully in January when the pop-up market, the farmers markets open. So I'm
Okay.
trying to do that, and I give out samples and try to do that. But overall, if you look at the whole situation, there
Uh-huh.
aren't many alternatives like the Westerners would call them,
Right.
and
Right.
there is quite a lot of inaccessibility when it comes to the vegan alternatives as opposed to the fast food market, which is growing rapidly.
Right. Yeah. So
And
basically, you have to innovate. I think it's the same with for Rubaya also, because I'm sure vegan alternatives are not like in India. I can say there is a lot of vegan alternatives now available. In Dubai, where I am right now, there's a lot of vegan stuff available. So it's easier. But and I remember I became a vegan 10 years ago in Bombay, and that time there was absolutely nothing. And I had to figure out my way myself and make everything myself. So I think you both are there at that juncture, right? Where you have to create everything, isn't it? So do you see that there might be a scope of, the wheat products coming in?
We make cheeses. We make dairy alternatives. Our cheeses are very popular, so much
Mhm.
so that I'm actually thinking about setting up a small scale cheese factory in Dhaka.
Mhm.
Um, the good thing about Bangladeshi diet is that we've never been very dairy heavy. So yogurt is a dessert thing, or you cook with it. It's not part of your regular meal.
Okay.
Butter, those things are not part of our regular diet.
Mhm.
Um, but things are changing. So ice cream, sweets, we're big on sweets. I'm sure there are,
Yes.
but not nearly as high as let's say India.
Right. Right. Okay.
I'm hearing a lot more about lactose intolerance. People are waking up to
Uh-huh.
lactose lots of allergies, lots of asthma, children who are allergic to milk and dairy products in general. Mothers reach out to us. Cancer patients, their family members reach out to us. So I can
Right.
see how they're starting to associate vegan food with healthy food, something
Right.
you when you're unwell. Um,
Right.
that makes us feel better. But yes, we're definitely looking into starting a trend of, and maybe even having a shop or supplying to different supermarkets. Or
Wonderful. I wish you, from all of us, all the super very best for that. And but how is the vegan community in Bangladesh? Like Ailya mentioned, there are about maybe roughly 250 odd vegans in Pakistan. How is it in Bangladesh? Would you have any
Bangladesh,
idea?
a lot of young vegans, Rena, and that makes me really happy. Every single vegan that I've come to know about, they're much younger. They're in their 20s.
Wow.
this 15-year-old girl struck up a conversation with me, and she wouldn't stop talking. She's so passionate about, and she has that fire in her that she just can't understand why is something so obvious or so difficult for people to understand. So I think nature has its way. Nature is naturally producing children who are wiser, more enlightened, more educated than our generation. Um, I see some vegetarians or some people who are cutting back on meat, but purely for health reasons, because the doctor told them, animal welfare aspect is largely absent. So I think in about 5-6 years, I will see many more vegans. But, it's also really interesting to notice that we are creating vegan curious community, people who eat our food, people who come to eat our food, and they're experiencing vegan food for the first time. That switch I'm talking about, I think some kind of a switch gets flicked.
Yes,
and
correct.
they want to learn more about it, they want to eat more. So even if they're not becoming vegan, I think a lot of people are open to the idea of cutting back, which is
also vegan.
Absolutely. Sometimes, you can get larger number of people to cut back than turn vegan. So I'm all for that.
Wonderful, wonderful. But tell me, does the Prophet speak about having animals? I mean, or eating animals? Is it there in the Quran that
There
you
is
should
a huge misconception about what Islam says about eating meat, because while we would hear, and it's always from men, somehow they associate eating meat with masculinity, and they would say that what kind of a Muslim are you if you don't eat meat? So somehow it's gotten into their head that to be considered Muslim, you have to eat meat. And completely false, because the word halal means permissible. So while Islam makes eating meat permissible, it doesn't encourage it. There's a big difference between something being permissible and something being encouraged. Our Prophet actually wasn't a big meat eater. There was even a quote from one of the Sahabis, one of his disciples, that said that if you eat meat 40 times in a row, 40 days in a row, your heart will turn to stone. So there are things like that. And also halal slaughtering or halal way of producing meat, the regulations that are mentioned in Hadith and Quran, in modern day farming, there's just absolutely no way you can adhere to those rules, thereby making every kind of meat haram in that sense, non-halal, even if they're not haram, non-halal, because they're not following those rules. It's impossible to follow those rules.
So you're talking about all over the world?
All over the world. All over the world. I mean, if you look at, you're not supposed to kill one animal in front of another. You're not supposed to transport animals where they're suffering. You're not supposed to keep an animal tied up. You're not supposed to even sharpen the knife in front of an animal. So imagine the factory farming setting, or even during Qurbani, in one road you have 10 animals lined up, one being killed in front of another. And this is in the name of a religious ritual. You're breaking every single rule that the religion has laid out for you to follow a ritual that is not even, it's an ambiguous ritual. Nowhere, does it say that you have to sacrifice an animal. So there's a lot of confusion about that as well. So it's just.
But how did this misconception start then? I mean, why is like non-veg considered to be a staple for a Muslim diet? I mean, how did it start?
We take whatever is convenient for us and we twist it around. Like there's also that misconception that a Muslim can have 4 wives. And this started from the time where there were a lot of war and there were a lot of widows. So it became at that time permissible for a man to have 4 wives for the protection of women, provided that he can care for all the wives equally. Correct. This is back then when women didn't have security, women didn't have shelter, women depended on their husbands. So you can't carry that forward to today's world and say, I can have 4 wives. So same thing. So yes, back then it was permissible to eat animals, but it wasn't, killing an animal for meat was never taken lightly in Islam. That is why there are so many rules, because it's not, you cannot just casually kill an animal for your
And
greed.
probably, Rubaiya, at that time, there were not, I mean, it was probably only if you saw an animal pass by, you probably wouldn't go and, I'm assuming, like, because it's that time there was less food and
Yes,
probably, yeah,
yes, it was, meat was consumed only during festivals and
festivals.
occasions. And, there is also a hadith that says, it's compulsory to save your life. So let's say you're stranded in a jungle and there's a deer. It's okay to
Right.
kill that deer and eat its meat, but then
Because
you
survival, right? Correct, right. And then also, as you mentioned, the
yes,
halal regulations. So,
yes.
okay, all right. So maybe most people are not aware yet. I mean, it's once that connection is made, then I think everything kind of falls into place, isn't it?
Yes and no, Rena. My experience, I think that meat is so addictive. It's an addiction, because if you ask somebody that, tell somebody that, oh, you need to give up eating spinach, they're like, okay, fine, I'll give up eating spinach. Talk about meat, it's almost the reaction is very strong reaction, because you're
Right.
basically asking somebody to give up cocaine, So, and it's
Yeah,
also
correct.
cultural implications, and sitting
Correct.
around dinner table eating biryani. So it's almost like you uh, take away something that is fundamentally part of their identity. And
Right, right.
so religion, they just use religion to strengthen their argument. I don't think they quite believe that they're,
Right.
but it's
Right.
almost like exploiting it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rubaiya, for clarifying this. It's pretty interesting to understand this because many people just have this misconception. But Ailya, you're very young now, and I mean, how old were you when you became vegan, or how young were you when you became vegan?
I was 31. I'm 33 now. So yeah.
Okay, all right. So, as Rubaiya mentioned, I mean, it's kind of like your identity. You've grown up sitting in a community and everything. So how have you been able to stand there, with your belief and with your values? You said, people were making fun of you or friends were making fun. How has that changed? How did you manage to, hold fort?
So there was something very interesting that I heard a speaker talk about once. And she said, I'm only answerable to the animals, you know? And this quote has stayed with me because whenever I think of how people are going to react to one of my posts or what I say or how I stand my ground, I always think, what would the animals want me to do right now? And this is thanks to the speaker that I heard once.
Right.
So it's that kind of a thing that gives me that motivation to
Strength.
stand ground.
Right, right. Yeah. But have you had any experiences where, it has not been that good? Like, where have you had to face something which has not been that good? Because, and you're a single woman living in Pakistan all alone. I mean, you're already breaking a lot of traditions in that sense, in a way, right? So, how do you manage to kind of keep that balance going?
If I understand correctly, I've been a bit of a rebel since childhood. So and that has helped me, I think, navigate a lot of my life. And I always have been kind of a rule breaker, and I've always questioned why do people do things this way, or why can't I do something differently?
Right.
And in a way, I've always tried to stand for rights. I used to stand for human rights. I used to stand for people for minorities, from minorities, and now animals as well. So in that way, I've always encountered some really dark moments as well. Like you said, there has been times when I wanted to give up. There were times when because that's a human thing,
Correct.
and I would give that credit to my cats. It's kind it's kind of a weird thing to say, but whenever I look at them, they give me the energy to get up and do my thing, take the day forward, and just get done with things as they're supposed to be. So there
I
have
know.
been times. There have been
I
times when I was down.
I can imagine, yeah. But I think that's such a beautiful thing. I think what you said, I'm only answerable to animals. Really, we are not answerable to anyone, any human as such. It's all in our head. So I think once that gets cleared, things just kind of fall into place. So so there's hope because there are a lot of youngsters, as you said, who are questioning and who are thinking. And as Rubaiya said, nature probably is trying to create the balance so that we you know naturally these kind of kids are coming up, and so future is looking bright, isn't it? Right. So Rubaiya, tell me, you are much older, of course. So I'm just trying to say that we're looking at two different kind of generations here, and the younger they are, the more accepting and the more open and elastic they are. But the older people get, they are a little more rigid. So how has it been with your family, and how did you kind of stand forth or took your fort?
The fact that I've been living on my own for a long time really helps. And I think
Mm.
one of the fundamental problems in becoming vegan in our part of the world, where it's not enough for you to become vegan, your whole family needs to become vegan or at least support you. So
Right.
I sort of started doing this on my own, and my struggle was very personal. Like I would get cravings, I would fall out of the wagon, I would start eating something I shouldn't be eating.
Shouldn't be
And
eating. Right.
because I never made the connection between nutrition and food cravings and gut health
Mm.
and all interlinked.
Mm.
So as far as my family is concerned, they teased me initially. But then, when they saw that I meant business, that I would just not eat if there's something on the table that is not vegan, I would just not eat. Eventually, they would start making food for me.
Right.
I started taking food for them, and they would always like what I would bring. And that's how it's understood that whenever they invite me, they know that they have to cook for me, or I would
Right.
cook for them. And I
Right.
throw down, especially on Eid, if there's no food for me, I would happily throw it on my aunt. So because I cook for them, I feel entitled to have
To
good at home when I go. Uh,
right.
I also make a point not to take my advocacy everywhere. Like when I'm out there with my family, with my friends, I don't talk about my advocacy. I don't, unless it comes up, unless somebody actually genuinely is
Asks.
interested and not
Right.
easy
Right.
meddling.
So I guess setting the example is the way to go. And then when they make the connection, they come to you automatically, isn't it?
I wouldn't go to weddings, and if somebody, most of the time people actually don't care if you've eaten or not. They'll just ask you, have you eaten? It's like, yes. And then
Yeah.
they move, but if
Yeah.
you big lecture, oh, I can't have biryani because it's a your time precious.
True.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah, I know. Actually, I think we all have gone through this initially when you make the connection. You're like, you want to scream to the world and say, hello, hello, can't you do it? And then there'll be a time where you kind of settle down and you just start accepting everyone and not judging anyone. And it's a process. And then you said, okay, when their time comes, probably you just pray, you know, सबको सन्मति दे भगवान, that kind of a thing where just let them make the connection, and you try your way in whatever way you can as an example. And I think you
I
both must have gone through this.
eat meat 3 times a day, so I know what kind of a mindset you would have to eat meat so much. So I have genuine compassion for
Yeah.
not compassion, but understanding of why
Yeah.
I'm think of giving up meat. So
Correct. Right. Right. So Ailya, tell me about you're working with Animal Alliance Asia. So what is the work they're doing, and what do you do? to take this movement forward?
Thank you so much, Reina. So with Animal Alliance Asia, I've been their strategy lead and I've been the country coordinator for Pakistan. And one thing that we're constantly doing is that we're trying to educate and mentor advocates and animal rights activists throughout the region. And I feel that this was so much needed in Pakistan, given that there are hardly any activists who are working for the vegan cause and animal advocacy specifically, which is anti-speciesist in nature. That this has helped to train a few advocates who I believe will take the movement forward and slowly will build some momentum.
So how do you do advocacy? Like, do you go and have talks? Do you stand on the streets with placards? Like, how does it work over there? And you're from Lahore?
No, I'm not from Lahore. I'm from Peshawar. I live in Lahore.
Okay, all right. So how do you do that over there?
So for Animal Alliance Asia, what I do is that we have online sessions. Like we have an academy coming up in summers, and it's open and free for anyone who wants to join. And it's a training program depending on the days that will be decided in the coming days. So it's a training program for people who want to learn advocacy, who want to learn how to work for animal rights in Pakistan. And we do this across different countries, not just in Pakistan, but we have a separate chapter for Pakistan.
Okay, all right. Which you're leading the strategy lead over there. Okay,
Yes.
all right.
And then
So-
at the same time, for apart from Animal Alliance Asia, I do my vegan outreach through one-on-one Instagram posts, or if someone wants to talk to me, I offer peer-to-peer.
Right. Okay. So whatever we can do in our own way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Lovely, Ailya. And Rubaiya, you were the first person to start an animal welfare organization in Bangladesh, the first person to start a vegan restaurant in Bangladesh, and probably the first person who will be starting a cheese store or a cheese brand in Bangladesh. So lots of firsts to your credit. I mean, how do you manage all this? How do you kind of keep that balance? Because you're kind of like a one-man army, right? I mean, there are not too many people.
And I never did anything alone. I have been very blessed with family, friends, patrons who have supported me along the way. There's just no way I could have done any of this on my own. So I count my blessings every day. And it's very easy to be the first when there's nothing happening. And this is a very area.
Right.
You know, I used to overload myself with work, and part of that I started vegan advocacy is because I was really burning out with my job in animal welfare, with dog welfare, and I wanted to choose something that would allow me to work in animal welfare without being confronted with the cruelty, day-to-day cruelty that animals face every day. So I started focusing in advocacy and also legislative reform. So we actually, a couple of years back, we updated the 100-year-old Animal Welfare Act of Bangladesh, which was, the last one was from the 1920s. And for the first time, we managed to include farm animal welfare in the law. So as far as the law is concerned, farm animal welfare is part of the country's development agenda now. You know, I pace myself. I watch a lot of Netflix. I hang out with my friends a lot, and then, you know, I take it very easy because I remind myself all the time that there is no finish line here. There's no race. This is something that I will be doing for the rest of my life. So the more I pace myself, the more I enjoy the process, the more I will likely to stay and
stay on track. Correct. Right. Yeah. Ladies, there's a lot of work to do. I mean, it's not only India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or Dubai right now, but it's all over the world. There's a lot of work to do. So I think we need, so I'm glad that Ailya, you're into training, and you are getting more and more people to get there, because many people want to do it but kind of don't know the direction. And I think the best way is just being yourself, and as you rightly said, ensuring that you're also balanced, because if you kind of overdo it, then it kind of backfires. So everything in balance. And I guess when time comes, we are just sent there, and things just kind of fall into place. Feeling really blessed that you both could join us today. It was a real pleasure, and I hope we keep continuing our work. So let's all keep working, and because the animals need us, and always remember your line: "I'm only answerable to them." Thank you, Rubaiya. Thank you, Ailya. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much.